So yeah, we're here to talk about collateralization, liquidations, the basic stuff, maybe some bridging as well. We'll see how spicy we can get. So first of all, can you guys just introduce yourself real quick, maybe 2-3 sentences?
Sure. So I'm Pepe, CTO at Meld. At Meld, we're bridging traditional finance with crypto. So we are building products both in crypto and in normal banks. Cards, normal SEPA transfers, as well as lending and borrowing protocols, staking, and all of these things. So the idea is to bring all the complex finances that people can find in the world right now to crypto so that everyone can access them.
Hi everyone, I'm Cyril. I'm the co-founder of Swap. Swap is an automated market maker that is engineered for liquidity providers. So if you've been helping on volatile asset pairs in AMM, you probably underwent impermanent loss and faced potential losses in capital. So we are solving that. You can think of us as combining the infrastructure of DeFi products, so composable, non-custodial, transparent, and accessible, with the performance of a centralized actor.
Hey everyone, my name is Ilgis. I'm from Gearbox. Gearbox is composable leverage protocol, which actually allows to apply leverage to any DeFi protocol. So depending on use case, it could be leverage trading, leverage farming, leverage staking. Everything composable in a true native DeFi way.
Hi everyone, I am Emilio from Aave. I'm currently VP of engineering at Aave Companies. I am one of, together with some other friends and former colleagues, like one of the designers of the Aave protocol in all the 3 iterations. And excited to be here and talk about all the challenges and future innovations that we will have in the future.
Yeah, so I guess let's talk about collateral first, right? Like what are the, I guess, interesting parts about choosing collateral, right? I guess there's some parts that are like kind of obvious of what is good collateral and not, but yeah, how do you think about that?
I mean, for me, at the end, collateral is how can you then sell that asset? How can you ensure that the digital representation of something has meaning, has value behind it? We always talk about stablecoins. This full event is about the stablecoins. But if we were to digitalize croissants or kebabs, they will still have to have collateral behind them. So collateral is what happens with this digital thing that you just built. Can I claim it for a kebab? That's the collateral. Then you take a huge leap into financials. You can create dollar-backed stable coins. You can create systems that allow you to redeem your digital element for a more real one.
I guess also is important part that we actually consider is about like smart contract risk. Like even if it's like usually ERC-20 contract, also there could be a lot of like hidden risks. Like it could be put on pause and something like that. So like smart contract is still like one of the important things to decide like how good this asset for collateral.
Yeah, I mean, some important aspects have already been discussed, like market liquidity first. So is the asset liquid enough to be able to ensure the essentially covering the debt that was drawn against it? So that's a very important aspect. Smart contract risk, so like in checking from a technology perspective that the asset is sound. So there might be, because of course a hack at the asset level means instantaneous insolvency and you basically don't do anything about it. There are other very important aspects, like in Aave we have a framework which has actually been defined within the community. So like in the community we have 2 companies, service providers that actually manage risk. And together with some other members of the community, they took like responsibility to build a full-blown framework to list an asset. And these are 2 aspects, but there are also very important ones that, one is centralization risk. So for example, wrapped BTC. Wrapped BTC has important centralization risk because it's centrally controlled. So validating how safe is listing a protocol that is centrally controlled in a protocol that is decentralized actually is, and how much power by doing so you are giving to this entity that is controlling this particular asset. Another important aspect is the asset native to the network where the market is being created or not? Because bridged assets have inherent risk, which is basically related to the security of the network itself. So an asset that is being listed on the other protocol, for example, on Polygon, and is an asset that is bridged for Ethereum, so for example, wrapped ETH, has inherent risks of being insolvent, not only because of the asset itself, but because the canonical bridge of the chain could fail, potentially. We had actually a situation like this in Harmony. Thankfully, the market was very small back in the days, but the Harmony bridge got hacked, and the other market has sustained losses, like small losses in the order less than 1 million, but still meaningful for the users. And that's because not of the protocol itself or the asset itself, but because of the underlying technology of the security on the underlying layer that failed, basically. So there are many aspects that are very important and very relevant. And I think there are others that are probably missing, but I guess you guys get the point. Yeah.
And maybe just to add a last point, obviously agree with what has been said previously. One thing that is interesting to look at is like how we pile up risk in terms of collateral and then liquidity management. So maybe just to take an example, some stablecoins are backed by USDC, and then they are paired against USDC in terms of market liquidity. So when we had like this USDC DPEG a few months ago, they were actually double exposed to the DPEG. First, in terms of collateral, and second, in terms of liquidity, because the way that the pools are structured currently in Curve, for instance, is that when an asset starts to drop in value, the pool starts to accumulate more of these assets. So as a stablecoin, if you are backed by USDC, so you're losing on your collateral, and you're also losing your liquidity because it gets drained by the DPEG. So I think there are some interesting like second-hand effects that can come into play.
Yeah. So for liquidity of a collateral, how do you think about that? Like I think liquidity is a very big word. To me, maybe the way I would describe it is there's like instant liquidity, right? If you need to sell something in 0 seconds, there's some amount of liquidity. I think this is probably pretty easy to measure, right? You can just check the curve pool and like how much can I dump. But that's usually like if you're trying to liquidate large amounts, that's actually not what you care about. There's like also liquidity with some kind of time factor. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely very interesting, not only in terms of amounts, because yes, USDC is liquid, probably yes, for like thousands of dollars, but maybe when you get into the millions of dollars, it's not that liquid. And I think to the point that was made before, when we start bridging to smaller networks, then it adds, like, there's different types of bridges. There is bridges based on liquidity pools, bridges made on blocking and minting assets. And I think that adds to the liquidity factor. So bridges that are based on liquidity pools are very illiquid or are very limited in the liquidity that they can get. Bridges that are based on wrapping assets, maybe not so much because you hold the full amount of liquidity. So yeah, I think instant capacity to execute on things is not only a threshold, or it's not like a progression on amounts, it's also a progression on like networks and where you operate your protocols.
Yeah, there are also, I think, things to explore regarding liquidations, more in terms of how we can better optimize the flows for this type of trading volumes. So from the perspective of like an AMM, you want to discriminate the flows that you are exposed to. So not all trading volume is created equal. So you have some trading volume that is considered as toxic, which is mainly volume that is informed. And that, so for instance, some hedge fund that has a fundamental view on the price or that has some trading signals, you would want to price them a higher price than someone who doesn't have a view on the future price of the asset. And actually in TradFi, that's what happens. Like Citadel Securities, they get much worse prices by market makers than your retail bank, your local retail bank. And I think liquidations are very interesting in the sense that they are not informed price volumes. So I'm definitely keen to explore like how we can better facilitate liquidations by giving better price to liquidators on chain and to enable more like easier liquidity for such products.
Yeah, I mean, also another important aspect, like on how we quantify liquidity, is are we able to have a reliable oracle? Because like liquidity is a very comprehensive term, like it can mean many things. So in Aave, for example, we evaluate where is the liquidity distributed? Is it mostly on-chain? Is it mostly off-chain, so traded against in centralized exchanges? How easy is for liquidators to obtain this liquidity and actually meaningfully liquidate a position on Aave that can reach tens or even hundreds of millions, right? So there must be hundreds of millions readily available. We experienced this situation, for example, if you guys remember the CRV short on Aave, which ended up, which was quite amazing, was actually pretty interesting to watch in real time, unfolding itself. It ended up in a very small bad debt for the Aave protocol, despite the position being like 8 million worth of collateral, and most of the collateral being actually off-chain, being traded from Binance. So, and all of these also affect the oracle design, because, for example, if most of the liquidity is on-chain, then how easy is to manipulate that liquidity and manipulate the price oracle, which can essentially bring a whole set of different risks, because an oracle that can be manipulated can be eventually source of insolvency within the market itself. And also, an aspect that I wanted to mention before as well, and I was kind of forgetting about it, is how an asset can be very liquid on the market, but if there is a lot of, for example, sell liquidity on outside the market. So one aspect that we evaluate in Aave when an asset gets listed is, are there big holders that are not trading and then can potentially massively alter the price? An asset can be very liquid, but if there are lockups, for example, that get unlocked over time and they are very large compared to the amounts that are present in the market, the asset can quickly become illiquid on the buy side, because there is an overflow of on the sell side. Therefore, that's another very important aspect that needs to be evaluated. It's a very wide topic, but like I think we pretty much covered everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like fragmentation of liquidity is one thing that's very important. And here, like for me, it's like what's interesting, I guess what happens right now is like rising was this RFQ infrastructure, intense-based different liquidity, and maybe like in a year or two we'll see like good progress here, and actually like problem of fragmentation of liquidity between chains, roll-ups, between SEX and DEX actually could be solved, and that valuation risks here will be like much easier.
So I think something very important that you mentioned is oracles, because at the end, coming back to what we were mentioning before, a stablecoin or a token, we need to compare it with something else in order to know the value. And oracle is something that if they want to manipulate the price, either directly or indirectly, is going to affect a lot of potential protocols. Like if Chainlink suddenly says USDC is worth 30 cents, we probably have a job in tomorrow, like most of us. So Oracle and risk factors are something that will define the success of protocols. Like Aave has done it pretty well over the last years, like risk factors and how you handle collateral, how you handle liquidation thresholds. Those are things that need to be accounting for Oracle risk, liquidity, and bridging liquidity around the different networks. It's not the same if we have a very liquid asset in our network, or if that asset is very liquid somewhere else, and it needs to come to us before we can actually use it. So I think oracles and risk factors are also something very, very important for protocols that use stablecoins, because you also cannot trust that USDC equals $1. There were protocols that had a lot of problems when Terra collapsed, because they said, this is a stablecoin, true, $1, and then suddenly went badly.
Yeah, it's actually a good point with the fragmentation between chains, or even just fragmentation in between markets, right? Like if you have your off-chain and your on-chain markets, it just takes some time for the arbitrage to happen. But it does happen. Like it is actually incentivized for the liquidity to move around to where it is necessary. So I guess considering that, do you think it might make sense to actually extend the auction durations for liquidations? So as far as I understand, most protocols today actually have very short liquidations, right? They try to liquidate everything immediately so that they aren't further exposed to the price. But could you see a benefit of actually increasing the duration so that this liquidity has more time to move around? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, the readiness of a liquidation and the duration of the liquidation itself is a fine balance. Mm-hmm. Basically, of course, there is no free lunch. So the more you wait, the more risk for insolvency there is for the protocol, essentially, because there is no predictability on what the price movement can be. So Maker has a slightly different mechanism because they actually implemented like auctions, but because it's basically it's the design itself that makes it very much easier to implement that way. We're kind of a delayed auction. It's not really delayed auction, it's delayed oracle. So they have an oracle that is not like, and therefore the auction is delayed because the oracle is not instantaneous. So it's kind of an indirect delay. But the architecture is different because they don't necessarily need to cover instantaneously liquidity that might be withdrawn, like in the case of Aave. Aave, it could potentially, the whole liquidity of Aave could potentially completely unwrap in 10 seconds, for example. If everyone gets liquidated or repays instantaneously and suppliers want to withdraw instantaneously, the protocol can do it, right? Because there are two sides. There are the supply side and the borrow side. I do think that, like in Aave, for example, we have this mechanism where there is an L factor that is calculated depending on the risk parameters of each particular collateral. And this health factor basically decides how safe is the position. And there is a certain point that depends, again, on the collateral composition of the user, where the protocol is insolvent. And there is nothing you basically can do unless, for example, there is a sudden market movement where collateral starts rising again, very high in value. But the lower the health factor goes, the more you need to collateral to raise until you reach a certain point where the health factor is 0. And if you have outstanding debt left, that's bad debt that is accrued to the protocol. So it is a fine balance that needs to be readiness and duration of liquidation and risk of insolvency that we basically try to model through risk management.
I guess also it comes with like balance with product actually, yeah? Because like if you should wait, for example, I don't know, 1 day for liquidations, what kind of collateralization actually you allows to have? And is it good product if you allows like 5% to borrow actually against your collateral value. So
I think something very important is everyone in crypto is greedy. So building security by incentivizing or utilizing and benefiting from that greed is something that a lot of protocols have done in the past, and I think is going to expand further and further. So obviously we need to have smart contract security, we have to ensure everything is playing around as good as possible. The product needs to be like, you cannot have like only borrow 5% of your collateral, of course. But I think for ensure that all positions in lending and borrowing protocols, but also other DeFi applications are healthy, use the greed of external users in your favor. Incentivize liquidations enough that people will be, like, they will not care to bring liquidity from other networks because they understand that the simple possibility that I could liquidate and earn $1 million, they are going to have that liquidity ready for that to happen. And therefore, if you incentivize that enough, everything and everyone will move things, will move the pieces so that at the end, the financial security of the protocols are robust. And it's an interesting term, like security by greediness. It's something I think crypto will heavily evolve in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I guess if the incentive to liquidate is high enough, then people can actually also afford to hedge their positions, right? Like maybe I don't want ETH exposure, but I need ETH ready to liquidate positions. But then if it is actually, you know, highly incentivized, I can just short ETH somewhere and hold the ETH, be delta neutral. I have some capital cost, but I am being incentivized for that.
Yep, definitely. And also when you liquidate, you may get assets that you are not super interested into, or that you don't have like a lot of liquidity right now to swap into a stablecoin. So using that like kind of shorting or longing or like using other financial tools to slowly minimize the impact that, like if an asset is free falling and goes to zero, you're done. But if it slide up and downs, then you can expose yourself to less risk by hedging or doing other financial instruments, while having all of that liquidity available to say, hey, there is 20 million that may be liquidated in Aave tomorrow. Let me have it ready.
Yeah, so the other topic we have also is bridging. So, I mean, it's kind of the trend now that some stablecoins are going multi-chain. It used to be there was only one chain that a stablecoin was on. There's a couple different ways of doing that. You know, you could just redeploy the system on a different chain. You can actually try to use the bridges. So what do you guys think are like the best choices to make the stablecoins available on multiple chains?
I actually had like 2 presentations already on this topic because we are about to propose like to the Aave community like one potential strategy to bring Go on different chains. Of course, the Aave market is like deployed in I don't remember now. I think 9 or 10 different networks, and like Go is like a stablecoin. It was released like 4 months ago, more or less, and it's still growing and it's still with some pain points that we are trying to improve over. And one of the things that, of course, we want to do to improve, like create new use case for Go is to bring Go in other chains where the Aave protocol is available. So in the strategy that we want to propose is actually going to try to, there are many painful points right now for assets, like even for us, like protocol developers, and that we take care of deploying depending on what the community decides, like the market on the Aave market on different networks. It happens very often that, for example, you start with bridged stablecoins because the network is, I don't know, new. It doesn't have native assets minted on it, and then like, I don't know, Circle or Tether come and say, you know what, from now on, like the bridged version from Ethereum is deprecated, we are gonna mint and generate the stablecoins directly on the particular net. It happened on Arbitrum, for example, it happened on Avalanche. And so if you go on the Arbitrum V3 market, you see two versions of USDC. One is the bridged one and one is the native one, and this creates a lot of problems for the users, because if I'm coming from Ethereum or I want to go to Ethereum, means that I need to trade first. So the approach that we want, hopefully we will be able to implement with Go, is to have native versions deployed on any chain controlled by the Aave governance, because Aave, thanks to BGD Labs and we built a delivery infrastructure to be able to send messages to any network where Aave is present. And so there will be a native version of every network controlled by the Aave governance. And then, at least at the beginning, the asset will be minted only on Ethereum, which will remain the main network where it can be generated natively by drawing that from V3, Aave V3. And then basically with the bridging, there will be a lock and mint mechanism, or unlock and burn, where to bring liquidity, you basically lock the liquidity on Ethereum, and you get like an IOU of Go through the canonical version of Go, which will be deployed together with the architecture to avoid, for example, having the main canonical bridge of the network handling and Go. This could create a lot of issues, so we're gonna try to use CCIP to try and minimize these UX complexities.
And maybe just to add on that, on the Bose version of the USDC, that's something I think you really want to nail as a stablecoin, like when you actually deploy a native asset. Because I think in the case of USDC, it creates a lot of friction for the protocol themselves. Because so in terms of liquidity, today you have both of these versions of USDC and USDC.E, which means that, and I mean, the migration is pretty slow. So I think at the moment we still see much more volume on both Arbitrum and Polygon on USDC.E rather than native USDC. So USDC.E is a bridge version from Ethereum. And what it means essentially is that you have two types, like you have pools of liquidity which are with USDC, others which are with USDC.E. You have volume which is flowing on both ends. So it means that liquidity providers are essentially split between those two assets. You're essentially dividing your liquidity by two. And if you don't provide incentives for people, strong incentives for people to migrate, the situation might stay for a very long time. And it hurts both like the peg of the asset. It hurts like obviously like the utility of the stablecoin. It hurts like the demand, because if you split the asset in two, it means that some flow is going to one version and some other is going to the other. So the yields are kind of split. So it's really a nightmare actually for everyone. And so I think it's great that you guys are addressing it from the start. I think, nailing the timing for that is really critical.
I mean, the thing is also that, like as you mentioned, if a non-canonical version gets traction, like you mentioned at USDC-E on Arbitrum, then it's really, really hard to convince people to move to the canonical version. So that's why we want to, and this is more like actually a community kind of, I would say, synchronization, collaboration issue on the social aspect, like social synchronization rather than an actual technical challenge, because you can deploy a native version, but if people somehow starts actually to use the non-canonical version, there is nothing that you can do. And then once it gets traction, then it's really, really hard, as you were mentioning, to convince people to use the canonical version.
That's partially the beauty of DeFi. It's decentralized, so you can choose whatever token you want. It's just that the official one may not be the one you choose.
Actually, like, there is another problem, actually, that this first version never dies. And if you remember, like single collateral DAI, I guess it still exists, and it's priced like not $1, but like, I don't know, 2 or 3. And actually there is no like liquidity, you can just go sell it or buy it, and it still exists, yeah?
And what's funny as well is that you see the same problem happening in liquid staking, I think, with the Lido, like, layer 0 kind of drama. So it's not only for stablecoins.
Drama is everywhere. For me, for bridging, I think there is 2 main points that we've partially touched based on. First is centralization, and second is backups. If you want a protocol to be cross-chain or multi-chain, it's very important that the bridges that you use are resilient and are secure. So there is a lot of projects working on IBC for EVM, but there is some people that go for like multi-sig, some people that say that like TSS, threshold signature sharing, is basically nothing, so they simply centralize it. So the security of the bridges that you use and that you base your liquidation and your risk factors on is very important, but it is also the backup. You can have like the best bridge in the world, that it can stop at some point. Things fail, protocols stop operating for whatever reason. So it's very important that you have backups in place for your network, for your protocol, to be able to move across and give the people, give the users the capacity and the flexibility to choose how they do it. Because some users may have a more risk-friendly appetite and say, you know what, I'm fine on like a centralized entity bridging my tokens, while others may want to pay a higher fee for it to be fully trustless or fully decentralized.
Yeah, I think it's a good point with especially like external dependencies that you build. Right? So one example is actually the Chainlink VRF for generating random numbers. They came out with Chainlink VRF version 2, right? And so now if you have an immutable contract that's pointing on version 1, it's deprecated, right? And you're trying to build these immutable contracts that like last forever. But then if you have an external dependency that isn't immutable and can stop operating, then it's a big problem, and I guess a similar thing could happen in terms of bridges.
Yeah, on this topic, like I really think this is a topic that pops up frequently on crypto Twitter, for example. Like, and there are the 2 sides, like the immutable side and the guys. For example, I do believe in the power of immutability, and I think it should be the goal for everyone building different protocols long-term to actually build something that is immutable and can live forever by itself. But I am also very pragmatic, and like this like kind of relates to what you just mentioned, that what we are building right now is basically experiments. Like they are technology that, in my opinion, is still not even close to be production to scale to trillions of dollars, just because we still are figuring out things, and there are dependencies, and we build often on top of other protocols like VRF, for example. So you may want to retain some ability to actually fix stuff, or to leverage some technology like VRF version 2, for example, or implement, change some mechanism that you might figure out how to do better on-chain because then it becomes a hassle not only for the developers that need to redeploy and redo everything from scratch, but also for the users, especially in protocols like Aave. Dexes is already a bit different. In protocols like Aave, where the liquidity is very sticky because borrowers are usually, there are tax implications, borrowers might just not able to repay at a certain point, suppliers are somehow lazy and they prefer, like if I'm earning the same interest, like I'd rather stay on V2 where I've been staying for the last year and a half rather than moving on V3 to V3. And for DEXs, it's already a bit simpler. So you take Uniswap, for example, it's very self-contained and very simple use case and very self-contained architecture, then that probably is much easier to build immutable from day one, but there are trade-offs as well on that aspect.
Yeah, I think with immutability, it's important to notice it's not just a binary thing, right? Like kind of the normal approach that is being taken today is if your contract is upgradable, you can replace the whole thing, right? But you could actually make it much more fine-grained, where you have like some functionality that is immutable, some things that you can change. You can also add the time locks, of course, right? So if the issue you're facing really is that like your external dependency is being deprecated, it's fine if you have like a 1-month time lock, right? This is not probably what you want if you want to be fixing bugs. But if that is the reason why you want to be upgradable, you can even have like a very long time lock where people know they're not going to get rugged, right? Because they have enough time to react. But you still leave yourself open for these kind of future options where you have to like adapt to the new state. Cool. So I think we do have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question they want to ask? I don't see any. Oh. Oh, she wants to know. She wants to know what we're most bullish on. Maybe for me, I'm bullish on Oracle-free DeFi. Right? We talked about like you need good oracles. Maybe you don't. There are some interesting things out there, like there's a lending protocol called Ajna and a stablecoin called Frankencoin. They're experimenting with like Oracle-free DeFi, where you are getting rid of this external dependency on a price. It works. There are some trade-offs, but it's probably the most interesting thing I've seen recently.
For me, I think it's user experience. We've been working on crypto. I've been working in crypto since 2016, more or less, and my friends still don't know what I do. And that's because, yes, they understand there is the concept of tokens, you can transfer them, you can do things with them, but we are still, most of our tools, most of our talks are very, very technical focused. So making sure that we keep that technical discussions flowing while giving a good product UX-wise for all users is very important. My mom doesn't have to know how a token transfer of balances works, but these kinds of panels needs to still happening. So I think it's very important we start decoupling, same as in traditional technologies. Like no one really knows what happens underneath when they check their email. Some people have studied it, some people have more experience with it, but you just click on like send email and things happen. That's the same UX that people will need to have with crypto to interact with protocols in multi-chain environments in a secure way. And I think that's what the highest leap is going to be on the next 3 years, so that we can get that adoption that we've been talking for the last 5 years.
So on my end, I think the ultimate purpose of DeFi should be to be the new infrastructure of the whole financial system. And I think that there are currently like 4 major things that are like preventing us from being that infrastructure. The first one is I think our blockchains are not fast enough. I mean, okay, today we're not using all the block space, but still, if we want to host the whole financial system in DeFi, we'll need like much faster blockchains and with lower transaction costs. The second thing I think is better financial primitives. I think we're still super far away from the efficiency of TradFi, and I think with DeFi we can do much better, thanks to composability, for instance. So that's what we're focusing on with Swap. The third thing I think is security. So yeah, I mean, we cannot run a financial system with hacks every day or like scams or whatever. It just doesn't fly. And the last thing, unfortunately, I think is regulation. We'll need to have a regulation which I hope aligns with our values, but will need to be integrated into society to be accepted. And so I'm bullish on anything that contributes to either of these four core things.
I'm bullish on account abstraction, and I think like it actually allows to abstract all this complexity, like private keys, fees, paying for gas, and so on from user, and actually provide like very good user experience for end user.
I'm bullish on Aave, but just kidding. No, just kidding. I mean, of course I am, but like, no, I'm bullish on builders. I think like this bear market showed that a lot of the people that was actually building stuck around, and it's still there and still trying to figure out things. I think we have a lot of problems to overcome in crypto in general. Some have been mentioned, like blockchain complexities, like regulation, and so on and so forth. But I think eventually we will manage to figure this thing out. Like, yeah, that's the hope at least.
Awesome. We're all going to make it, huh? Once again. Thank you very much. Thank you to our speakers. That's it.